Welcome back to our Next Respect Project talk. Today, we're going to be talking about infant feeding with three medical experts that are near and dear to my heart. I have with me today my pediatrician, my OBGYN, and my lactation specialist from when I was a new mom. We also have a part of this community for this conversation today. Two Emulate members, Zulay Henao and Madison Blampied, who are a part of the Emulate community. So Dr. Robert Katz is a leading OBGYN in Los Angeles and affiliated with Cedars-Sinai. Dr. Peter Waldstein is a distinguished pediatrician for over 43 years. And Linda Hanna is the co-founder and chief nursing officer for a company called Mommy. And like I said, each of these specialists were a part of my life when I became a new mom. And we have these two new moms with us, Maddie and Zulay, to talk about bottle feeding, breastfeeding, and infant feeding as a whole, which is a pretty, touchy topic. It's one that people need a lot of support with. For me, it was the most complicated time of my life. And so it's a real privilege to be with you guys today and share some of your current information with new moms and new families alike. Just to give a little bit of background about this company, Emulate, that I keep mentioning, it's a new baby bottle company that's coming out in January. It has been developed to close the gap between breastfeeding and bottle feeding and mimics the physiological experience of breastfeeding from the bottle. And so with this innovation, we hope that this is a support to new moms and new families. And so I want to sort of get into some of the concerns of new moms for you, Dr. Katz, when you're dealing with women and families and discussing pre-delivery issues. Are there a lot of conversations about breastfeeding? I mean, what are their main questions as they're about to become new parents and the whole infant feeding process for them? Do you talk about that?
The answer is yes. And I think it's a very important conversation. We talk about, obviously, most of them are for new moms, but we talk about, prenatal classes as well as breastfeeding. And patients have the ability to take classes either through Cedars or through professionals like Linda Hanna, or go to their website. And we certainly encourage people to get involved early on to learn about breastfeeding and the importance of it, and the importance of and kind of how to do it. Most of it is kind of hands-on. So, it works a lot better when you got the baby in hand, but certainly talking about it early on and trying to figure out how you want to approach it is very important. And there are a lot of areas where they can learn about it, as well as in the office.
Yeah, I remember back when I was a new mom 100 years ago, you guys all helped me find the pump station, which became sort of this source of inspiration and support. And I needed a lot of it then. And I really do hope that Emulate becomes not only a brand, a bottle to feed babies, but also a community where we share our stories and we, create information and accessibility to that information to new moms. Dr. Peter, you see a lot of new families. I mean, what are their concerns in regards to feeding? What are some of the new guidelines and your thoughts on that topic?
Well, I think the main thing is to just give them a lot of encouragement and tell them that it's not such an unbelievably hard thing to do. And the breastfeeding in new moms really creates a lot of anxiety. So you need to instill them a lot of reassurance. I also encourage them to see a lactation person at Cedars, okay? And from minute one, start to breastfeed. And when they're out of the hospital, if there's any type of difficulties or issues, Linda Hanna is there to help.
She was. That's a perfect pivot. Linda, how do you see Emulate changing lives just from your perspective of advising new moms? I mean, you were there with me in my hospital room in Cedars-Sinai, and I had a really seamless transition, but it's not always so seamless. And actually, the CEO of Emulate's wife had some issues with breastfeeding. I mean, how can Emulate create, bridge that gap as we've been saying?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me too, and all the accolades. Thank you. The thing is that what women need to know that they will be supported through their entire process. That's really the key. And if the process means that there's going to be a disruption in feeding, and there has to be another way to feed the baby. For example, we have a pediatrician on the line where babies are jaundiced and they need to be supplemented, or they're having medical concerns, or admitted to a hospital, for example, or staying in a hospital. Parents need to know that the transition from a breast to another alternative feeding method, in some cases, in this case, bottle feeding, can be done seamlessly, and that the baby can have what seems and appears to be a very similar type of feeding style. The emulate bottle is a replica of the mother's breast. It was part of the scientific advisory's job to make sure that this seemed and acted and felt just like their own mother. The baby didn't feel much of a difference. So we want to make sure as lactation support for these families that they don't feel such disruption in the way they're feeding their baby.
Do you find that there's an increase in mothers that want to breastfeed now from when you started? I mean, what's the sort of overall temperature around moms wanting to breastfeed?
If you're asking me, I've been doing this for over 40 years now. So we had a lot of women who wanted to breastfeed many years ago, and it seemed to sort of fade away a little bit. It almost became like breastfeeding was too much work. And now it's completely the opposite. Pretty much everyone wants an opportunity to at least be able to provide their baby breast milk, theirs, a donor, a milk bank, or someone else's milk as early as possible, or surrogate parents that want to be able to give their baby some special milk for their baby, that breast milk. We do that in the hospital. The babies who are put in the NICU for some reasons are given donor milk or milk banked milk. So we make it a big deal about nursing a baby and being able to breastfeed or chest feed. And we want to encourage parents to know that it's important for however long they can do that for. If it's a week or a month or 2 years, the American Academy of Pediatrics has always got a new statement coming out on the value of breastfeeding and chest feeding and breast milk for their baby. So yeah, it's definitely, the pendulum swings. There's no question about it. Women are very excited about the idea that they can feed their own baby.
Zulay, you became a mom before Maddie. I'm just curious, what were some of your insecurities about breastfeeding and your concerns about breastfeeding, and where are you now? I mean, for me, I went back to work. I was successful breastfeeding, but I had to also bottle feed just for my own mental health. From day one, I pumped and I bottle fed. And then when I went back to work, I had a pretty rocky experience after that. I'm sure I called Dr. Peter like nonstop, telling him all my about it. What is it? Where are you at now?
Yeah, as I sit here and listen to what Linda just said, that that there's always new statements being put out about how much time and with the length of breastfeeding and what's best and what's not. I didn't have any anxiety going in or even thinking about breastfeeding while pregnant, but the anxiety hit the moment the lactation specialist, or not even the lactation specialist, but just the moment that this became a thing that I now had to worry about. And I feel like there's so much built in stress for young moms, whether it's at the hospital, whether it's through friends, through your own mom, through your sister, through people who have done it, because there's just always been a varying degree of what it looks like to do it successfully. So for me, it became a point of contention. I'm like, I did all the things. I was taking the teas and eating the right foods and trying not to stress about it, but it was like counterintuitive because it wasn't working. I was just constantly stressed about this thing. So I didn't necessarily get the opportunity to enjoy breastfeeding because I loved it. I enjoyed, my baby latched on beautifully. There were never any issues with that. It's just that 4 months into the process, it kind of sort of, the flow stopped. And then that came with a lot of shame and just all the other things that we've talked about in other conversations hosted by Emile and that I've expressed to you, Elisabeth. So for you guys on the panel who are professionals, and for these new moms or moms that are pregnant now, about to become new moms, what would you say about managing that kind of anxiety and stress around this thing that becomes monumental and that is really a lot out of your immediate control? Or is it not? Am I wrong there? Because the milk ends for a myriad of reasons. What are some things that we can leave our moms here today that I can take with me? And I will say the one thing that I do remember, it happened actually at the Emule photo shoot. I asked the doctor that was there with us that day, I said, I was only able to breastfeed for 4 months. And he said, wonderful, your body did amazing. And he just filled me with all this positivity, and it kind of ended that guilt or that thing I had with my breastfeeding journey. So I applaud him for that. And that's my story. But I want to know from you guys how you guys prepare young moms with, because it changes so often what, you know, is said to be normal or advantageous for the child.
Well, try to give them a lot of reassurance, give them information about the advantages of breastfeeding, the skin-to-skin contact, the bonding with the baby, the passing on of the mom's antibodies to the infant to prevent infection. And I would say to them, you know, if you're breastfed a month, it's better than nothing, you know, and, you know, I just, a lot of positive reinforcement.
But even for those that aren't able to actually breastfeed, pumping and giving the baby the milk in a bottle is still getting the exact same thing. So the ability to be able to freeze milk or to process the milk by just pumping is still breastfeeding per se, even though you're not, you know, physically breastfeeding. So that's also a very positive thing from what you guys are doing.
Right. And I think, you know, remembering back to a million years ago, and then I want to move over to Maddie and sort of hear your background as how you became involved with Emulate. But, you know, I think I was encouraged probably by Linda and Dr. Katz and Dr. Waldstein to take care of myself as well and get rest and be balanced and not to feel any shame around bottle feeding, you know, like Dr. Katz said, pumping and allowing myself to bottle feed or have, you know, a caregiver like my mom or, you know, somebody help out so I could get rest and take care of myself as the parent. Maddie, how did you get involved with the brand? I know that Emulate is really committed to research and outreach to new moms and, you know, getting a snapshot of what their journey is so that we can create a community around all of the new moms and new families.
Yeah, thank you for having me. So I basically was involved in their study. I visited a lactation consultant 2 weeks after I gave birth, just to get that reassurance that everything was going good. My baby had latched. I was feeding, hopefully the best I could. And that lactation consultant had reached out to me and said, would you be interested in trialing this new bottle? I said, sure. By the time I was involved in the study, my baby had taken a bottle once. We'd kind of tried it, but he was mainly breastfeeding. So I wasn't sure how it would go. And when I met them, I was just taken aback by how innovative, how incredible, and how just revolutionary this bottle was. And I was speaking to the lady who was taking the study, and she said, the owner's actually outside if you'd like to meet him. I said, I would absolutely love that. And from there, I had just been in contact with them and I was like, I have to work for this company. This is incredible. It aligns with my background. It aligns with my new job as a mother in motherhood. And from there, we kind of were speaking for a couple months. And then I was able to join the team recently and just help them with their business development and creating that community around all these women who go through this. I think there's a lot of shame similar to what Zulay was saying, and a lot of guilt that women feel and women hold when they feel like they haven't breastfed for as long as they wanted. We always go into this with a certain expectation. And as women, we're very hard on ourselves. And the second I think you don't meet that expectation, it's very easy for your milk supply to dry up or your milk supply to slow down. And it's a tumbleweed effect. The second you're stressing about that, it's obviously not helping. And similar to what Zulay said, when someone's telling you, you need to relax, don't think about it, don't stress about it, it's impossible. It's really impossible to kind of not stress about it. But yeah, that's how I got started with the company.
You know, I think that's a really important point that you're bringing up, because for me, I never have experienced depression in my life, but for the first time and the only time I did around my journey of breastfeeding and the lack thereof when I began to go back to work. And Dr. Katz, I know you're like, you know, you're an OBGYN, but you're also like a therapist to all of the for your patients. So, you know, Sorry about that. But anyway, when it comes to breastfeeding, it's such an emotional journey and it can oftentimes bring on depression. I mean, have you seen a lot of that with your patients that they
100%. I mean, postpartum depression is a real thing, and we pay close attention to it. A lot of times it's from tired and fatigue and, even frustration if they can or cannot breastfeed. And, sometimes they need help, and to be told that, it's okay to, either pump and go to sleep and let somebody else help the baby, or to seek therapy, or even get Linda Hanna out there to out, because there's no question that she is not only a breast she's not only a breast expert, as well as her website, but also she helps these moms understand that they're not alone and they're going through the same stuff. And as you were alluding to before, there's certain conditions that don't let you breastfeed, for example, such as having a breast reduction and or having breast cancer, and or there's so many, or being depressed, and that you can't keep up. So women need to understand that these things are normal, and they're not alone.
Hey, Linda, how often do you hear about these issues too? I mean, Bobby said, they come to you.
Well, they don't come to me, but go ahead, Dr. Katz.
Linda's the savior.
Well, no, it's not just me. There's a whole team of us.
Oh, Linda, take it.
There's a whole national team of us. Listen, so this is very important. Probably the most important thing Dr. Katz was alluding to. There doesn't have to be a stigma attached to breastfeeding length of time. There shouldn't be a rule of women following how long they should breastfeed, or how their friend breastfed, or how their sister or mother. There's nothing that should be put in there when you start this journey. This is a very interesting and unique individualized experience, not only with the first baby, with the second, with the fifth, and with the ninth baby. They all breastfeed differently. Their mothers and families are in different places in their lives. So I think we have to do a better job of making women feel good about what they've done. Like Dr. Katz and Dr. Peter just said, sometimes a week, a month, 2 months, 4 months, it's enough. And we do have to watch. We're constantly watching for women's wellness, their physical wellness, and their emotional wellness. We do this every single time we interact, whether it's in the pediatrician's office. Now they're checking the mother's postpartum depression screening scores. The OB physicians have an obligation to also pay attention, and they do. They listen when the lactation consultant or the nutrition or the nurse who's following the mother is saying, I'm a little concerned for how her behavior, her affect, her attitude, or her feelings are. We know rest, we know nutrition wellness and physical wellness, and getting out of the house is extremely important for women's mental wellness. So we're paying a lot of attention to that too. We're also talking to women and families who are starting their pregnancy journey with a mental health issue, for example, anxiety or depression, medicated or not, going through a difficult experience, sometimes multiple things happening during their own pregnancy and ending with a birth and a story. So we're very, very mindful to watch as women progress through this whole experience. Thank God we have the physicians we can turn to, since we can only provide support, guidance, and education. Our physician team helps us make sure that the mothers are getting the extra care they need, and sometimes a therapist, sometimes a psychiatrist, and sometimes the physician advises medication when necessary. Sometimes it's the pediatrician who picks up on that too. So we're all connected. We all have to stay very connected.
I think Dr. Waldstein, there are new, the American Pediatrician Association's come out with new guidelines. Can you tell me what they are and what your thoughts on why these are the new guidelines?
Well, they do recommend that you breastfeed for at least 6 months. And if you do that, that's all the nutrition that the baby needs, and you don't have to start solid foods until 6 months or thereafter. And if you can go a year, that's the optimum.
Do you think that this has anything to do with the formula shortage, or?
Well, the formula shortage certainly encouraged people to breastfeed, or they starve their babies. But I think it's important as a pediatrician to follow up with well baby visits and show the mom that the baby is thriving and gaining weight and doing well and meeting its all the nutritional needs that a baby requires.
By the way, the hospital is making a big push now to make sure all moms, or at least they have a certain criteria. They're trying to get as many moms as possible to breastfeed and not to bottle feed.
And if you can't breastfeed from the breast, I think this is where MUA comes through so seamlessly, is what you said, Linda, is that it doesn't have to be this big ordeal, that we have companies and people like MUA now who have created this product that will seamlessly help you transition from breast to bottle in the best way that we have to date. Like you said, it's the most innovative, most technologically advanced bottle feeding system that we have to today. And Elisabeth, you know better. When do we launch again? October?
We launch October for pre-orders, but we hit the market in January. That's a really good pivot. I was going to say to Maddie, your background is as a biomedical engineer. Can you tell everybody that's listening today about the app and sort of, you know, the patented design behind this app, and exactly sort of break it down? What is the MUA bottle and why is it so innovative?
Yeah, of course. So the MUA bottle is the first biomimetic bottle. So what that's doing is it is mimicking the physiological milk flow rate of a woman's breast. It is also mimicking how a woman's breast appears. So to a baby, obviously when they're trying to bottle feed, a lot of babies experience bottle rejection. They won't take a bottle. As a breastfeeding mom, this is very stressful, as you can imagine, when we're trying to go back to work and we can't feed our babies and we need somebody else to be feeding them. So what MUA does is we actually have an app where you scan your nipple. It doesn't collect any images. It's purely just data points. So the privacy of the user is protected, and we tailor a bottle to that user's anatomy. So what it is doing is it is allowing you to select your bottle based on 5 different shades and 5 different shapes. So we have collected data from studies and found the most common shades and shapes of a nipple for the woman to obviously select. If you don't want to scan, if you can't scan, you can also just select whichever bottle you would like, or the most common bottle. The reason this is so interesting as well, obviously we've spoken about it, it closes the gap between breast and bottle, and it is an extremely innovative way for us to transition between breastfeeding and bottle feeding and prolong that breastfeeding for as long as possible. There are no other bottles out there the other bottles out there are currently standing as substitutes to breastfeeding. MUA is the first one that is actually trying to have women breastfeed and trying to assist in that process. But an interesting aspect as well is if we do look at the medical need for some babies aren't able to breastfeed or latch onto their mother's nipple for medical reasons, such as a tongue tie or something that they're born with. If they're unable to latch onto their mother's nipple, we have found that if they have a different nipple that they can select through MUA that is able to be better tailored to their mouth, it can, from just having a different breast, they are able to now experience bottle feeding in a way that is very similar to breastfeeding. So there's also that aspect of it.
I love that.
Linda, I was going to ask you, go ahead, Zulay.
I said, I love that. I hadn't heard that yet. That's amazing that is a possibility, that they can choose a different nipple that isn't what their mom would have to help them latch on better. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Linda, I see you nodding. I was going to say, I mean, just from your perspective, I can say how MUA would have, made an impact for me because, drying up after 7 months, going back to work, Dr. Peter knows my whole story. I went back to work. I starred in a movie, and through the stress of all of that, pumping wasn't working. And then I suddenly had to be fully bottle feeding. It was a very depressing time for me. It would have been amazing for me to have a bottle like MUA that had it was mimicking my breast and nipple for my child. And I think it would have made me feel like I still was a part of that story with Easton. So I'm just curious, how do you feel MUA fits into the world today, with a lot of more moms or working, more empowered women? What are your thoughts on, MUA kind of coming out today with the new modern woman?
Well, I think that's a good question. I think that what we wanted to do, so the Scientific Advisory Board took the aspects of breastfeeding very, very seriously when building this, if you will, model for feeding, trying to match as closely as we could what happens with the anatomical breast and the anatomical mouth, so that those two pieces could come together and work in unison, but also be almost identical. I think what we wanted to have, and what's really important, is that women who want to carry on continuation of breastfeeding beyond a working situation, and they're gone from the house 8 or 10 hours a day. We wanted them to be able to come home and the baby almost seamlessly switch back to their breast. And so in order to do that, you had to have a baby who was suckling and doing the mouth motions, the tongue motions, as close to what they did on their own mother's anatomy, exactly the same as they did on that mother mimic bottle, and then come home in the evening and go back to the mother's breast. So that was the whole premise behind it, is to not interrupt the feeding cycle. So we had to make it as close to, almost identical to. That's why it has different flow rates. That's why the bottle can be adjusted to match a mother who has a more overactive milk ejection reflex versus a mother who has a little bit of a slower flow. Some moms with oversupply, some moms with more moderate supply. And so that's what our goal was as a team, was to try to make it as close to, almost duplicate, so that the parents could go back and forth. And whoever was caring for the baby while the parent was gone, who was the feeding parent, that person would have a similar feeding experience for that baby and for themselves. It's about the care provider, the caregiver, so that they felt comfortable feeding the baby the same way that the parent who was nursing that baby felt. If that hopefully that answers the question. That was the premise behind the scientific advisory division.
It's interesting to hear that background from both you, Maddie, and Linda. Also, Maddie, I wanted to give people a little bit of an understanding about Shiloh, the founder of Emulate, and why it all began there, and what was going on within his family, with his wife. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, of course. So basically with his daughter, when his daughter was born, his wife was breastfeeding. And when they did try to transition to bottle, she preferred the bottle, and she didn't want to go back to breastfeeding, and she actually did have a tongue tie, so she wasn't able to latch as good. And Shiloh is an incredible man and a genius, and with his background, he really realized that this is something that is missing in the market, and he made it his mission to close the gap between breast and bottle and bring something to market that would help women in switching between breastfeeding and bottle feeding. So that's kind of where the company started, from his own personal experience, but he knew there are so many mothers out there experiencing the same thing.
Zulay, I know that you're a little bit further down the path with being, having a new child, but how can moms get more support? We want to build a company, but we also want to build a community. And thankfully, I had Dr. Waldstein, Dr. Katz, and Linda to help me. But what do you feel is missing for new moms?
What is missing? I don't know that there is something missing per se. I think there's an overstimulation and over conversation about so many of the things that could potentially go wrong. I think that if we continue to reassure mothers that they're doing the best that they can and that their body is performing the best that they can, and that whether you breastfeed for a month or 6 months or a year, if you're go to that optimal level, that's great. But I think that support from your friends, from people in your community that are around you during these hard times, but also I think kind of self-regulating our own emotions around this and understanding, having grace with ourselves, which is something that in retrospect I wish I'd had a little bit more of, because it would have allowed me to enjoy the process a bit more. I would have been more in tune. I would have been, just enjoying the moment with my baby so much more instead of stressing so much. And just to kind of echo with what you just said, Linda, is that Madison, that Sheila and Emulate are really took a really personal situation and expanded on it in such a great way that this is really going to be a powerful tool that we can all use. I'm planning on getting a bottle in October because I'm still feeding my baby at night. She still takes 2 bottles a day. So I'm still hoping to kind of be a part of the story and spread the word to I have a lot of mom friends who are new moms, 2 to be exact, that have a baby at home right now. And I'm constantly sending messages of support and saying, hey, it's okay if your body is changing, just go with the flow, don't stress out too much, and just let it be what it's going to be. And I'm also spreading the word about Emulate because I think it's absolutely genius.
Dr. Katz, are you still here?
No, he's gone.
Okay, Dr. Waldstein, I was going to ask you, when mothers are going...
I'm here, relax.
I throw this out to all of you. When moms are going back to work and try as they might to have they're committed to breastfeeding, but they've got to go back to work and they're beginning to experience stress. What do they share with you? What are their main concerns when they're about to step out of the home and go back to work?
Well, again, it takes a lot of reassurance. And if they have the proper caretaker in their absence and they have a milk supply that is pumped, the baby is getting milk. And I'm sure when the mom comes home from work, we reassure them that the baby will latch on or, use Emulate in a profitable manner.
Linda, what do you hear from moms who need to go back to work? What are their main concerns?
I think everybody has the same concern. Am I going to be able to maintain a milk supply while I'm gone? We have to understand that when people are at work, they're expected to do their job and concentrate and focus on the work that they have in front of them and not worry about running to the pump all day. So we like to set people up for success by having really timed time away from desk or time away from work so that they can calmly pump in a happy environment. So they feel positive about the milk they are producing, whether it's an ounce or 5 ounces or 10 ounces. We want them to be pumping well and not worrying about what they left behind at their desk, but just really have focused attention and time. We also like them to know that when they bring that milk home, that'll be used well for the baby in the following days or weeks, if they're freezing ahead or storing ahead, but also not to get too obsessed about it. Sometimes we'll even have mothers stop pumping while they're gone away at work, concentrate on work, come home and nurse in the morning at night. Breastfeeding has tremendous, tremendous possibilities. It's not an all or none. There's so many variables about how women breastfeed. Some do once a day. I put my baby to sleep at night. I nurse my baby to bed. I nurse my baby when my baby wakes up in the morning. Sometimes women come home for lunch and they breastfeed. There's no one way or you're done. So we like to give them opportunity.
You just said that, Linda.
I do too. And so I'm sure this will seem like a curveball because none of us here have expressed that we could do this successfully. But what are your recommendations for nursing up to 2 years old? I mean, what is your opinion about nursing until a baby is 2?
For me personally, I don't have an opinion. If a mother and a baby are in unison and they want to continue to breastfeed for a year or 2 or sometimes longer, that's mutually agreed upon between the mother and the baby. And as long as the physician, for example, decides to talk to that family about conception again. If you're pregnant, you're breastfeeding a newborn, or an older child rather, and you're pregnant, that's a discussion to have with the physician provider from the obstetrical world, not for me. It's really up to them. As far as for the pediatrician, speaking to the pediatrician's point of view, if the toddler who's nursing or 2 or 3 year old is nursing and the pediatrician says, this child is growing well and your baby's also growing well, they'll give them the check that you're good to go. I think this all has to be looked at with a very wide lens. It's not one little thing. We look at the whole big picture. So it's mutually agreed upon health benefits for mother, baby, and family. Everybody has to be treated fairly and treated with respect. That's the only way this works anyway. And there's no time limit. It's a mutually agreed upon family decision. And with the provider support, we'll just help them. We keep just pushing the parents along on the journey, and we know when we need to call for help.
Dr. Katz, do women know prior to giving birth that they're not going to be able to breastfeed for, a number of medical concerns? I mean, do you see that?
Well, we talked about that earlier, the concerns of the women that have had breast reduction surgery, the women that have had breast cancer, women that, emotionally are not, they've had babies before and they just know that they're not interested in breastfeeding. So, some are by choice and some are not by choice. And we live at least in a state where everyone gets a choice. Other places, maybe, I'm joking, but not funny.
Well, no,
it's true. It's actually true.
Not funny, but thank God we're here. And there are definitely scenarios where where they're unable to. And, we support them in many different ways. And if they can't, there are milk banks there, and there's also other avenues, obviously bottled milk and stuff like that. So we have to respect everybody's choices and or their disabilities, whatever they may be, and move forward.
And I feel like under those circumstances, whether, you used a surrogate or, beforehand that you're not going to be able to breastfeed, I think that, being able to have a bottle that emulates your natural breast allows you to continue to be a part of that story, to feel like you're intimately feeding your child in a way that, includes you still, which goes then to some of the mental health concerns, which is it's emotional, whether you can or you can't, or like Maddie or Zulay, who had a very successful career as an actress, is now gone back to work. I mean, how are you two juggling? You're now, Maddie, back at work at Emulate. How are you managing to juggle having these little babies and now beginning to perform again in your jobs?
I know it is a lot of work. The first day that I was completely away, it was just pumping, going off into a bathroom, pumping in between breaks. And like Linda said, it was because I was on set. I also felt extremely guilty about having that time away. And was trying to kind of hurry because I didn't want to slow down what was happening in the progress we were making that day. When I'm at home, because I work from home, I'm transitioning between both either my nanny is feeding him with a bottle of my breast milk. If it works and I can feed him between meetings, then I feed him. So it's going with the flow and just kind of doing whatever you can. In instances. I also wanted to mention as well what you were speaking about before with women who do know that they're going to bottle feed and they either don't want to breastfeed or they're choosing not to, or they can't breastfeed. If they are presented with options, because there is these issues around bottle feeding with a baby's oral development, and we're seeing rising obesity levels in children because they're not having to work as hard with a bottle as they would on breast. That's the other part of Emulate, because they have gone into such specific details to really mimic the milk flow rate and everything. It is a bottle that's actually helping their oral development. So new mothers can have that kind of ease. Okay, if I'm not going to breastfeed, at least giving them this kind of bottle isn't going to, is putting the best foot forward kind of thing in the bottle feeding situation. So yeah. Zulay, what is it?
No, yeah, Zulay, yeah.
Oh, I was just thinking about how fascinating that is. So I just got back last night from my first time away working. I was able to take Kennedy, my daughter, with me, and it was amazing. I took my own advice this time around, and I gave myself a lot of grace. I had very long days on set. It was 2 weeks of doing obviously work that I love, but still, coming home to a sleeping baby, sometimes not being able to be the one to put her to sleep and to give her her bottle. But this is the beautiful thing about life, is that as you live and you have these experiences, you have the opportunity to take those experiences with you and learn from the past. And I just remember thinking to myself those nights that I did come home and she was asleep and I wasn't the one to put her down or to give her her bottle, that she's taken care of. She is okay. She is well fed, and she will be a happy baby tomorrow. And I'll be a happy mom tomorrow because I also did something that I love. Am I not here?
Happy baby,
yeah.
happy mom.
Oh,
yeah,
happy baby, happy mom. Yeah.
Exactly. And bottle feeding has given, you guys some balance, right?
Exactly. Yes, absolutely. To be able to go back to work and not feel so much guilt, and to be able to, like you said, Dr. Oh my God, I keep Waldstein. I keep wanting to say Dr. Epstein, Dr. Waldstein, to be able to provide joy and happiness for your baby and still go out into the world and be creative and create joy for myself. That is the ultimate win-win for me. So
I know we're beginning to run out of time, and it's a Sunday, and I appreciate everybody's time on this Sunday. I know there's some golf games and some sports scenarios going on. So thank you. But Dr. Waldstein, I know that Maddie referred to some of the other reasons why breastfeeding would be potentially challenging, like premature preemies, cleft palate, nipple confusion and things like that. Can you talk a little bit about, just from a pediatrician's point of view, other variants that would make breastfeeding, impossible or very, very difficult?
Well, tongue tie was one, but that can be rectified in the hospital. So that's an element that can be eliminated. It really depends on what the issue is, and most of the time, if physiologically they can't breastfeed, emulate will help because it will provide breast milk. And that's the whole objective of this, is to provide breast milk in an unstressed situation.
Dr. Katz, can you talk about, just from your perspective, how you think emulate might help some of your patients who are new moms?
Well, first of all, on the surrogate part of things, I think it'll be huge because I know the parents want to be able to bond just as they do if they delivered themselves. So I think that would be a huge help in that realm. But also patients that may not feel as confident breastfeeding, and then can hold the baby close and give the baby something that is similar to their own breast. I think it's going to be a kind of a fun idea that hasn't been done yet, and it'll be a little more entertaining than what is the usual.
Well, are you guys, I guess I'm going to wrap up with you now. Anything else, especially, it's very rare to be able to be with a pediatrician, an OBGYN, and a lactation expert all in one room. So is there anything else you feel like you could give or share, with new moms, new families? And I think, Dr. Katz, like you said, it's really true. I think the modern family, with surrogates and wanting to either create a relationship. I have a really good friend who is my age, who just had a baby, had to use a surrogate. And I was thinking of her so much as Emily and myself, we were developing this relationship, how much it would have helped Sam, because she's not a part of that story when it comes to feeding her infant. And this would allow her to create some intimacy between her and her new baby. So I think the whole modern family angle is also very interesting. Dr. Waldstein, Linda, do you guys have anything more you want to add?
I think it's a great baby shower gift, and you should promote it to showers.
I also think that you have to educate the mom and the dad about the advantages, physiologically, and to prevent disease, and tell them it's natural milk. If they ever looked at a baby formula made in the United States and see all the additives, the sucrose, the cornstarch, and all the junk they put in there, it was certainly, open their mind.
Dr. Waldstein, I have one question for you that a lot of moms are probably going to ask, because I was asking this for a while. What is the best baby formula being formulated at the very moment in the United States? I was on Bobby for a while until I stopped, but what is your recommendation at this point in time as it pertains to formula?
To be honest with you, I recommend the formulas made in Europe, Holly, Hip, and they're readily available. They really are. Great, good to know. That's as close to breast milk as you're going to get.
Can everybody afford that though, Peter?
It depends where you practice.
Well,
they're very affordable now. We have By Heart and we have Bobby brand in the United States of America that are replicas of the organic formulas from the UK. But yes, they're actually very affordable, and they're actually very kind to the baby. And so of course we would like to see the babies having more organic formula, but we cannot forget. And one of the things that that is very important behind this company, and specifically with Shiloh, is that we want women and families to be able to have breast milk made for and by themselves. And even into Dr. Katz's recommendation, where he has quite a few parents in his practice, as well as Dr. Waldstein in his practice, who have had the benefit and luxury and magnificence of a woman being able to have a baby carried by another host for her. But that doesn't mean they can't actually attempt to make milk or try to make milk or even breastfeed and chest feed their own baby. So we'll get milk from someplace. We'll even get sometimes formula, and we'll have the family engaged in breastfeeding. And sometimes even with a supplement, we sometimes have to use a formula if we can't get enough breast milk. So we want people to be able to have their babies surrogate or their own birth breastfeeding, so that when they have to use a supplementary bottle, they use the Emulate bottle that actually mimics what happened at the breast. So not all babies who are chest fed, breastfed are getting their own mother's milk. That's really important here. And not everything that goes in that bottle is directly from that mother. Dr. Waldstein saying, give the baby as much human milk for a human baby as you can, will help you find a way to get it. There's sharing, there's milk banking, there's donors, there's a host of ways for women to get milk for their own baby and then put it in a substitute from the breast into this type of a bottle system, which we spent over a year working on the mimicking of it. That's the piece of the story that must be told. It is identical to the way a baby removes milk from the breast, whether they've had their tongue tie revised, whether they had a cleft lip or palate revision. Babies who have cleft lip or palate can breastfeed, will breastfeed. And when after their surgery repair, they can go back on the breast well. There's so many parts we can't talk about today, but we want women and families to know we're going to support them from prenatal through the first year of life and beyond with all the support, whether they're using their own milk or someone else's, whether their baby's on the breast or not, they still get a good shot at doing what they want to do till they don't want to do it anymore. No forcing women to do things that they don't want to do.
Well, I think that's the best way to sort of wrap this up, because I was going to say to Maddie and to Zulay, women are more empowered now than ever. And I think, like you said, Linda, this company is committed to supporting women and creating a community of shared stories and shared information from experts like you. So just thank you all so much for your time. And if you want to add anything else, this is the moment.
Elisabeth, great job being our host here.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're so amazing.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
I just want to add really quick that even though we've had a really scientific and medical conversation that I've learned so much from, I want to just make sure that I reiterate how important it is to have grace for ourselves through these trying times as women, that we often forget. We want to get so much support from outside of ourselves, but it really comes from inside of us. So don't forget that there's an immense support system within you that you can get through these tough times and thrive, have you and your baby thrive.
Well, not everybody has Dr. Waldstein, Dr. Katz, and Linda on speed dial like I did, but if you have them on speed dial, you've got to surround yourself with a really strong, beautiful community of help and support, like Zulay said. So there's a myriad of reasons why people would need to bottle feed, but I do hope that we've sort of shared with you about Emulate with these three incredible experts. And we hope to continue to be a community for mothers and new families. So thank you guys so much for your time.
Very informative. Thank you.